Okay, for 89, they're saying determine the positive value that makes each equation the positive value, right? If the answer is not a whole number, write it as a square root, and then approximate it as a decimal. I'm okay if you don't approximate it as a decimal for this one. So x squared equals 36 for A, right? X squared equals 36. So x equals, we only want the positive, right? So x equals 6 for the first one. For B, right, x squared equals 65. So x equals the positive square root of 65. And we could leave it like that. For C, x squared equals 84. So x equals the square root of 84. And we could leave it like that. And D, x squared equals 13. And x equals root 13. And we can leave it like that. Now, the reason I scratched out approximate to the decimal, round this to the nearest tenth, is because I prefer you to approximate square roots differently. So let's take a look just how we would approximate this one. Let's just do this one, root 65. So I'm going to clear everything, right? And we're going to approximate root 65, right? Let's say we're going to approximate root 65. So the way we do it is we find the perfect squares that are closest, right? So 64 is below it, right? And then 81 is above it, right? So it's 64, 65, 81. And then we find the difference between 64 and 65, which is 1, right? And then we put that over the difference between 64 and 81. So the difference between 64 and 81, 81 minus 64 is 17, right? So we get that it's 1/17 of the way through there. So the square root of 64, right, if I write the square roots here, is 8, and the square root of 81 is 9. So it's 1/17 of the way between 8 and 9. So an approximation for root 65 is approximately 8 and 1/17, right? It's an approximation. I prefer you to approximate this way versus to the nearest decimal because I feel that this is a little bit more accurate. Now let's see how close it is. So if I take 1/17 and I type it into my calculator, I get 0.0588. So this is really 8.059, really, right? Or 8.1, right? So let's now type 65 into our calculator and take the square root. And when I do that, I get, so this one, right, so let's just be sure what we're doing. 8 and 1/17 is this when I take it into my calculator. And root 65 when I type it into my calculator is 8.062. So that's pretty close approximation, right? So I prefer you to do it this way versus to the nearest tenth because that's more guess and check, the method that the textbook uses.